Welcome back to Get Down to Business, this show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. Super duper excited for this conversation. One and only Buki Mosaku, who is the founder and CEO of London-based Diversity Think Tank, a workplace bias and diversity and inclusion consultancy. He's one of the world's foremost bias navigation experts, and he has written a new book, I Don't Understand, Navigating Unconscious Bias in the Workplace. Buki Mosaku, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Absolutely. We know that unconscious bias in the workplace is a thing, and our small business owners tuning in certainly want to get after some of these issues. So I always love to get to know the person behind the microphone. Buki, you have quite the reputation. How did you get into this line of work, and what's kept you interested and engaged throughout that time?
Well, look, I was in consulting, and I was consulting all over the world through another business which was focused around communication. And I observed in the process of that, I came across racial bias that I experienced, but also I looked at, I was exposed to the ways in which unconscious bias was addressed in organizations, big, large, and small. And I felt that not enough attention was allocated to equipping people with skills to navigate it. And also, from my perspective, I said I was experienced racial bias. Sometimes it was mine, but sometimes it was towards me. But other times it was towards the majority, and I didn't realize at the time. And so I really couldn't understand it. So I was confused. Hence the name of the book, I Don't Understand: Navigating Unconscious Bias in the Workplace.
Absolutely. So, Buki, one of the things that I know our listeners are curious about, regardless of what size business they are privileged to be a part of, is how unconscious bias affects employees, but frankly, impacts the entire organization.
Yeah, look, you know what? Unconscious bias, affects well-being. It affects output. It affects productivity. If you are in a team, be it part of a team or you're a people manager, right? You'll have people from different backgrounds, different personalities, different regions, different ethnicities, and so having a harmonious and cohesive unit drives productivity and performance. And unconscious bias, that is unconscious discrimination, can affect that seriously and reduce productivity. Organizations in the States are losing over $500 million a year due to disengagement related to unconscious bias. So that just gives you an idea.
That's a staggering statistic. I'm chatting with Buki Mosaku, the author of I Don't Understand, Navigating Unconscious Bias in the Workplace. Again, staggering statistic right there. And it's the reason why everybody needs to get in touch with you. But Buki, one of the things that we are a practical show. We like to give our listeners real advice. And one of the things that you talk about in the book, and frankly, you talk about wherever you go, and we'll get people in touch with you through your website. And of course, the book is talking about some of the strategies. You call them multi-directional strategies that staff can utilize to tackle some of that career stifling workplace bias. So essentially, what tips, what advice do you have for our listeners?
Well, the number one piece of advice that I have, right, is that there is a multi-directional nature to workplace bias. That is, we have to accept that we're all biased, which most people do. But what they don't accept is that or acknowledge is that there's a multi-directional nature to it. That is, there are two forms, and that can stifle people's careers and their business opportunities. But what people don't talk about is what I describe as reverse bias. Reverse bias, and that's the second form of bias. And that's when you misinterpret unfavorable, or at least sensed unfavorable decisions towards you as driven by unconscious bias. Well, that's actually your bias, because that misinterpretation, what's it based on? Well, it's based on past experience, hearsay, a wider narrative about, I guess, the majority, and that shortcut to that, anchor to that, and that becomes your bias. So there are two forms of bias, right? Directional bias and reverse bias. If people can accept that, and unsubscribe from what I describe as a guilty perpetrator versus hapless victim model, that is, there are these people out there that look a certain way, walk and talk a certain way, they are the guilty perpetrator, and that these people out there who look a certain way, walk and talk a certain way, they are the hapless victim, right? if people can unsubscribe from that, because that's a one-way street view of unconscious bias, if they can accept the multidirectional nature, I can show them how to navigate it. So it's very important that we accept this multidirectional nature of bias. But of course, people don't want to, especially majority members, because they don't want to seem unsympathetic to the equality cause.
Absolutely. Buki, I want to make sure our listeners can get in touch with you and pick up a copy of the book. How can we do that?
Yeah, the best place to get in touch with me is go to bukimosaku.com. Right, that's the website. Alternatively, what I'd love your guys to do if they work in any size company is to take Mosaku's bias navigation test, and they can do that at biasnavigation.com, and this is free, and this will tell them to what extent they are tackling effectively workplace bias in their organizations.
Well, I certainly encourage all of our listeners to get in touch with you, BukiMosaku.com. It's a great new read, and I look forward to having you back on. Buki, we'll quick break. We'll be right back and get down to business.